Now you're playing with power! The Nintendo Entertainment System. It was—
Now you're playing with power!
Dude, we kind of did that joke already.
Never mind!
Get the power. Nintendo power.
Hey, that works. It's a known fact that this piece of hardware right here is legendary. So legendary, in fact, that I'm pretty sure that there's not a single person on the face of this planet who hasn't, at the very least, heard of it.
They were the phoenix rising out of the ashes of the video game Crash, bringing new life into the world that would expand to what it is today. Okay, it could be better, but still, Nintendo was the shining light raining down on kids and adults who wanted to bring video games back into their homes. And over the course of its lifespan, and after, hundreds of video games were created, as well as many wonderful franchises that captivated the hearts of millions. So a top 10 list like this isn't easy to do.
So, as always, remember, this list is personal to the BrotherhoodofGaming.com. If you share the same opinions that we do, that's fantastic. If you don't, that's great too. Either way, here is our list. The Brotherhood of Gaming's top 10 NES games.
What will the future bring from Nintendo? More hits like Super Mario Brothers.
The Power Glove for your NES. Now you and the games are one.
When you play the system with the most arcade hits, now you're playing with power.
You know, it was very rare back in the 80s to play a video game which starred a celebrity. And back in that time period, Mike Tyson was the man. We have fond memories of sitting with the family watching Mike Tyson fight. When he stepped into the ring, you know it was not going to end well for his opponent. Beating him seemed just like an impossible event. What mortal man on the face of this planet could stop him? In Mike Tyson's Punchout, you star as Little Mac, a small-time boxer who fights his way up the rankings on his quest to face Mike Tyson for the heavyweight championship of the world. But along the way, you must face off against a horde of interesting characters. Using a modified top-down perspective, the game was all about timing, knowing when to punch, when to dodge, and when to block. This game starts off easy enough, but as it gets going, the challenge level really cranks up. Each fighter has their own unique fighting style, with their own strengths, weaknesses, and ways to attack them. And if you get to the final boss, Tyson himself, you will need all the skills that you have mustered because he is one of the hardest bosses in the history of the NES. Hey, would you expect anything less?
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
Okay, hold on a second. Yes, we know that Snake's Revenge isn't canon with the Metal Gear universe. Yes, we know Hideo Kojima had nothing to do with it, and yes, we know it's a sequel to the butchered NES port of the original Metal Gear. But, all that aside, Snake's Revenge is actually a really good game. Remember all of those bugs and problems the first port had where it pretty much destroyed the entire mythos about what it was going for, and all the typos that just made it worse? Well, Snake's Revenge pretty much has none of that, and for a game that wasn't made by Kojima or his crew, it followed the original Metal Gear game's formula on the MSX as though he really was behind it. Sneaking was effective, all the traditional Metal Gear items were present, and the combat was great, and the story for what it was actually was pretty good, as a follow-up story to a pretty simple sneaking mission campaign.
You guys gotta remember, back then we didn't have the huge archive of a Metal Gear story that we know today. Back in the 80s, there was only Metal Gear.
So making a follow-up game that tried to expand upon what the original guy planned was pretty ambitious, and as far as a complete working game, it actually worked. I know a lot of us Metal Gear Solid fans like to write this one off as a bad attempt to continue a story that didn't involve Hideo Kojima, but trust us when we say, you may actually want to try it. You might be surprised and glad you did. It may not be canon, but if you enjoyed the original 2 Metal Gear games on Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence's bonus disc,
well then, you just might find this one as worthy as them.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
Oh yeah, now we're talking. Godzilla. I know some of you have already been led to believe that this game is a bad one because of another's opinion, but let us share our own. That person is wrong! Okay, so Godzilla. Mothra, for some reason, is also a playable character. Can't blame them for adding some variety. You cross over stages like a checkerboard and begin traversing the areas you crossed as you select a monster. Godzilla can kick, punch, swing his tail, atomic breath, all of that. It's awesome. Enemies will get their own turn to traverse towards you until both of you run into one another, and then you start the timed fight scenario until one of you either drops or your enemy escapes. Mothra flies through stages at a faster pace and travels farther, but ultimately I find her kind of pointless for my runs, and, well, I just kill her off so I can get back to playing as Godzilla. He's really all you need anyway. He's more than powerful enough to take on all of these guys, and then some. The game can throw little tricks at you here and there with some enemy placement, but overall, it's really well put together. It's a short game you can beat in a little over an hour, but it's a fun and wild ride just to side-scroll your way to victory and beat down some familiar faces in the monster lineup. Some of the monsters take more of a strategy approach to beat, and I find that personally a lot of fun.
And at the end of the day, you guys know what? He is Godzilla, the king of the monsters. You do not mess with the Force like that. And that's why Godzilla makes the list with relative ease.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
In the late 80s and early 90s, Ninja Turtles ruled the world. And so did Ninja Turtle video games. While Turtles 2 was a fun port of the popular arcade game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3: The Manhattan Project built upon it. The game features its own unique story, expanded moveset, and brought in characters from the cartoon show, the movies, and the comics. Turtles 3 felt like a worldwide adventure, as we battled Foot Clan and forces from Dimension X in many locales, from beaches, the ocean, the sky, rooftops, among others. The only thing missing was the option to play as Master Splinter. Unfortunately, we would have to wait a few console generations before we got that opportunity. Beat 'em up games is always fun with a friend, and you'll need one here, because the game has plenty of challenge. That and the Konami code. That helps. Bottom line, if you manage to beat Super Shredder in the end, you earn the right to say Turtle Power.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
Oh boy. Now this is one I'm sure a lot of you have many experiences and bad memories with. Oh yeah.
Ninja Gaiden. On top of being a classic series still going on today, it's notorious for being among, if not the most difficult video game franchise of all time, for probable arbitrary reasons such as a jam-packed enemy placement, cringing level designs, and character conditional hazards that make these games absolutely hell to play, and will lead players to destroying many household items and screaming at the world. The game is simple enough. Being a side-scroller, you play as Ryu, and slice your way through enemies and jump and hop through and over platforms to get from point A to point B, complete with a boss to end off each stage. The first few stages aren't that difficult, honestly, but after a while, players will notice an immediate change in pace as over the course of a few levels, the game gets very dickish. As enemies will find easy ways to trip up your character, and, well, more often than not, cause you to fall down a pit where you die instantly and have to restart the stage. And it never lets up. Flying adversaries, foes with projectiles, and oh, it gets worse. Should players make it to the final boss, the foe will have 3 forms to defeat, and this must all be done in one go. The first one is easy enough, but the second form is legendary among cheapness that people still see therapy for. Making matters even worse, oh yes, it can. Should you lose to this fight just once, which is very easy to do, the game sends you back a whole 3 levels. And by the time you get to retry the fight, you're too surprised by it that it just causes an endless loop until you start getting worse at the game, and then you can't even make it back to try the fight again. And the game has no game over, so you're free to keep trying all you want. The game knows it's futile, but why do we do it? Because you
can't let the game win like that! That's why!
Still a great game, though.
I agree.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
Licensed games has had a checkered past, but when they were in the hands of Capcom, chances are we got a solid adventure game that captured the heart of the Disney product that it was based upon. Great examples for the NES include Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, Mickey Mousecapade, and The Little Mermaid. But the game that stood above them all was Ducktales. Based on the hit show of the same name, which was all kinds of awesome in its own right, Ducktales the video game had a lot going for it, but chief among them, the excellent soundtrack. The Ducktales soundtrack is one of the most memorable in video game history. We could listen to it all day. But it takes more than music to make a great game. The platforming was well implemented. Now it did borrow heavily from the Mega Man engine, but it did have its own uniqueness to it, through the use of Scrooge's pogo stick. This pogo stick allowed you to traverse through dangerous areas and reach higher levels as you search for treasures and hidden items. Scrooge McDuck was all about seeking riches, and that is the name of the game here as well. With fun treasure hunting, fun platforming, and a second-to-none soundtrack, this is really one of the best in the golden era of licensed games.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
Now, Castlevania II was an interesting experiment, as they attempted to add more RPG elements to the series. But the time Castlevania III came along, they decided to go back to the original gameplay. Castlevania III Dracula's Curse was a prequel to the original game, as you played as Trevor Belmont, adventuring through Transylvania to destroy the forces of Dracula. The classic atmosphere from the first game is back here in full force, along with the gameplay and all of its difficulty. But there were added features introduced in this game that would affect the rest of the series. This game allowed you to choose multiple routes, and allowed you to come across new characters that you could play as. Alucard, who was the son of Dracula, Sypha, who was a beautiful sorceress, and Grint, who can climb on walls. Hey, that's pretty useful. All of their abilities were very helpful, and they added to the variety of the game's action. This was the final leg in the Castlevania NES trilogy, and the hardest. But challenge, when done right, can be very rewarding, and Castlevania III was a great example of that. Watching the castle crumble in the distance was extremely satisfying and a proud moment for any Castlevania enthusiast.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
There had to be one Mario game on this list, but which to choose? You could honestly put all three on this list and they would not be out of place. But we're gonna go with Super Mario Bros. 2. Mario travels to a new world to save it from the evil Wart, a giant frog that shoots bubbles. Is there anything more terrifying? While the power-ups from the first game are pushed to the background here, in its place are the ability to yank useful materials out of the ground, such as vegetables that you can use to bop your enemies one. Also, you can choose to play each level as one of 4 different characters. Mario's the most well-rounded, Luigi has the highest jump, though it's a little sporadic, Princess is the slowest, but she does have a nifty float ability, and Toad, who cannot jump as high, but he is the fastest. Honestly, of all the classic Mario games, we have probably played this one the most. With its distinctive gameplay style, multiple characters, and fun platforming, Super Mario Bros. 2 was a different experience compared to the first one. But sometimes change can be a very, very good thing.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
Mega Man, the Blue Bomber, the Fighting Robot, the Blue Soldier for Justice. One of the most favorable characters in all of the video game world, everywhere outside of his own company, of course.
Alright, now for this list, if we have to choose one, we're gonna choose Mega Man 2. Now hold on, before any of you guys roll your eyes at us, please hear us out.
We're not selecting Mega Man 2 as a means to say it's better than the rest. However, we use it as fans of the series and claim that this is where the formula and true quality really got grounded for the series and began its major success. Despite the first one having made probable accidental success, it's a decent game in its own right, but does have some level design issues that made it less appealing than most. But Mega Man 2 started it all with the traditional formula and an incorporation of new tricks that Mega Man would use and get upgraded as each game would go along and get more in depth. 8 Robot Masters, secret items, awesome music, the whole series provided it. While Mega Man 1 started the life of the Blue Bomber,
Mega Man 2 may have ensured that it would grow up strong and grow up right.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System.
boy, are you about to be shocked.
Yep, but don't get us wrong. We love the original Legend of Zelda and hold it in such high regard as one of the best Nintendo Entertainment System games that was ever made. However, we would have to go on record and say that we prefer The Legend of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, a little bit more. Here's why.
Everything about Zelda 2 felt more alive and active. While the first one started the overhead gameplay style with a barren world and dungeons to crawl in, Zelda 2 expanded upon a starting series that, at the time, had absolutely no standard gameplay yet, and it definitely wasn't the first to try it. Castlevania 2 was different, Super Mario 2 was different, Metroid 2 was on Game Boy, so is it really fair to pick on Zelda 2 for doing the same thing? Absolutely not! Although we do not think that you guys aren't allowed to have your own opinion on the game itself. If you are not a fan of the style it presented for specific reasons, that's perfectly fine. We just hope such reasons go beyond the dumb ones of it being a black sheep or straying from the formula that wasn't established yet. Or, a lot of other people hate it, so I should too. The game sucks.
Yes, these people exist.
But we're not saying the game is perfect either. Like many Nintendo games at the time, it has its very over-the-top cryptic moments of complication where you are forced to buy a subscription to Nintendo Power just to know where the heck to go and what the hell to do. And it's also amongst the hardest of the NES games as well for reasons similar to Ninja Gaiden. But I wouldn't say it's that hard. Honestly, we'd say once you've passed Death Mountain, you've essentially gone through the worst of it. But don't expect the rest of the game to be smooth sailing either, but Zelda 2 offered a lot with a single adventure. Multiple towns with NPCs, buildings you could go in and get special powers from wizards, people who would help you out to restore your powers as well as give you vague hints on what your next objective is. But hey, at least it's not as vague as Castlevania 2. The rest of the game, jam-packed with dungeons, awesome music, secret caves, and a bunch of items, and an RPG level-up element. Sure, it's the first and only kind in the mythos to be in this format of gameplay, but we would argue that we'd like to see a new attempt at this. Zelda 2 really is a great game, despite some harsh criticism. But hey, your opinion is just as valid as ours.
And on our top 10 video games list on the Nintendo Entertainment System, not many games come finer than this ambitious title that was a sequel to a legendary franchise by Nintendo. Well, there you guys have it. Nintendo had a lot of games to choose from, shoot, over 700. Selecting just 10 of them was an oxymoron. So, let us know. Did we make you guys really mad that you're going to rage in the comments and tell us how wrong we are and how our list is stupid? Well, that's what it's there for. Meanwhile, you've been watching the BrotherhoodGaming.com, and we will be sure to come back again soon with another great top 10 that'll be sure to make you even madder.
You're damn right I'm hating. Why was Gyro made on this list? Be sure to rate and comment, subscribe, and be sure to tell these guys how wrong they are.